I did something slightly different because I started with an idea, which was, I'd read several books in which you have like a motorcycle gang with these guys who are trying to keep their wolfish beast under wraps, and they're very tough and they're sort of aggressive. And I thought, is that really an that just continues the sort of Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale projection about what a wolf is. And I thought, in fact, they're quite shy and they're incredibly social. And so I thought, let's change that around. Rather than being men who are trying to keep their wolves under wraps, why don't I make them wolves who are using their human form to survive? So that was one tiny change. And from there, I then thought, okay, how do I make them vulnerable? Because they had to be vulnerable. And one of the ways I decided to was that they had to change 3 days out of the month. They would have to be wild. Um, because I didn't want them to be able to just like hang out in the basement eating meat out of a meat freezer for 5 hours during a full moon. I wanted it to be a length of time that would require a pack and substantial territory and real hunting and just make it wild. And I had them come over in 1668 for various reasons, which I'm sure nobody wants to know. But in 1668, after deforestation, which was very much a thing in England, I had them come over to the New World and settle in what was an incredibly wild place at that time, which is the Adirondacks. And I know a little bit about the Adirondacks because my father lived on the sort of southwestern edge of it. So it loomed large in my childhood. But then from there I grew the world. Since I am a medievalist, I decided to use what I knew as a medievalist. I remember when I first heard my old English professor um, speaking out the words to Cadman's hymn, Nue shulan harean hail fan ritus. And the way he said it, and he was thumping on the table, and I thought, if wolves could talk, this is what they would sound like. And so I used the words of Beowulf. I used the mythology of Anglo-Saxons, which is Garm and Fenrir and Tyr and all these other, also Viking, but also they were adopted by Anglo-Saxons. And you can switch them around. You move them around. So Fenrir is now the hero and not the villain of the piece. Um, and I just had an enormous amount of fun with this kind of world building.
I was going to ask you about the Beowulf thing. I'm a fan of the Beowulf story. It
Mhm.
was a great movie with oh, I just lost it. It was the one with Angelina Jolie as Beowulf's mother. It was one before that.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
um, Beowulf and Grendel, I think, is what is
Right.
the actual. Anyways, I thought it was fantastic. I thought the story was real good. We've actually sold quite a few copies of the book. We've had some used ones come in every so often, and they go. And um, so I was just wondering how you did work that, because it says on your website you're trained as a medievalist, and you um, try to shoehorn the language of Beowulf into places where you really don't need to. So what is it? What is a medievalist? Did you use that
Um,
training in your stories?
yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that I think is wonderful about, usually you're an English major, and so you follow a thing through history. And if you're a medievalist, or if you are a classicist or anything else, you are looking at one timeline very intently. So you have music, you have religion, you have art, you're studying history, you're studying economics, you're studying literature, you're studying all of these different things. And the only thing that ties them is an actually pretty broad period of history. It's almost, depending on who defines it, it's 800 years. It's sort of four something to 12 something, depending on who you're talking to. And but it gives you all the elements you need for a world, right? It gives you the art, it gives you the literature, it gives you the religion. So I think it's actually something like that which makes you look at an entire culture is very valuable for then trying to build your own.
So using that, did you, because you see a lot of werewolf movies and werewolf in books and stuff, and you get that stereotypical, version of it. Are you able to use your training and your knowledge with myths and legends to either make an accurate portrayal of them or something really unique?
Um, it wasn't so much that as I did a lot of reading about wolves. And in fact, there were certain things um, that I was able to use in a narrative sense. For example, wolves are one of the few animals that have whites around their eyes. So we do, wolves do, dogs do. And the theory behind why that's important is because if you have pack hunters, seeing where they're looking when you're hunting is extremely important.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a little detail, not a huge thing, but it gave me this sense of how, of paying attention, the importance of paying attention to each other. And within a love story, that's also crucial, you know?
Hmm.
So, just in the one that I just finished, the idea that somebody paid attention to this woman who had always been, assumptions had always been made, and one of the wolves pays attention to her and realizes that those assumptions are false. So it's a way of using something which has to do with wolves and making it a sort of narrative, a crucial narrative point.
So we have one question already on here from Elaine. Have you read Anne Bishop's books about the others?
Yes, I have. And I mean, I have, no, I'll say, I think I've read four of them. And I think I mean, she's an amazing writer and she has a richness of world building. And I do like her wolves. I did not read them until actually I was in the middle of of writing the second book, but I had a number of people who had made that comparison. And so I thought I've got to read her. And I'm actually also reading one of her earlier books, Sebastian, right now. So, yes.
What do you think about some of the characters in, well, one that I watched, a movie that I watched was Blood and Chocolate.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I guess it's a book too. I never read the book, but I did see the movie. Normally something I wouldn't watch, but I thought it was very, very good. What do you think about movies like that? Do you think those are more stereotypical? And also, have you seen the Underworld series where they have the vampires against the
Yeah.
werewolves? Do you find
I've
that?
actually, yeah, I actually use that. I have, um, they have a movie night. My wolves have a movie night every month. And one of the things that they do is they watch old werewolf movie or they watch werewolf movies. And for them, their entire frame of reference is to these werewolf movies, which they find hysterically funny because it has nothing to do with their reality, and for them
Mhm.
they change slowly and it's all very, it's all very uncomfortable and they're dedicated to the wild, so it's not this sort of slavering beast. And I actually have one guy who in the fourth book who is sort of the fellow who knows all of the minor details about Wolf Cop, the movie, and about, the bite and ginger, what was it, ginger snaps, and all these other werewolf movies. Though in fact, I have a very low tolerance for horror. So,
So, what are some of your favorite? portrayals of werewolves, either in other than your own books, in books or in movies.
Well, I think as Elaine said, the Anne Bishop books are really excellent, but so are the Mercy Thompson books, which I mean, Mercy is a coyote shifter, but as a I do like those because it's very much a sense of community uh, um, in those books. And I think, one of the things that I've always loved about fantasy, or I frequently love about fantasy, is the found family aspect. You often have, I don't know if you've, what was it called? The Wild, Kings of the Wild.
Hmm.
If you haven't read that book, it is fabulous. And I'm now forgetting the name of the author, but it's really good. And everything from the Fellowship of the Rings to the Shadow Hunters. There are often these groups of people who are together and have each other's back, and I very much like that. And so I don't, often there's this. Sometimes there's a lone wolf aspect. Oh, Shelley Lawrenston also does some very good. I mean, hers are a little bit rougher. They tend to be sort of motorcycle club types, as far as I can tell, but they have very much a sense of community, and they're very funny.
So Kings of the Wild, Nicholas
Yes,
Ames.
Ames, yeah.
Eames.
Ames, yeah.
We had a comment, and I actually thought of this too when you were talking about movie night. Lisa over on Facebook made a comment. Bet they like that Michael J. Fox teenage wolf movie,
Werewolf
Teen
in
Wolf,
London. Yeah.
the Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, surprisingly, my wife is not a fan of werewolves. I mean, she doesn't mind reading about them, but watching them. But for whatever reason, Werewolf in London is one of her
Oh, really?
favorite movies. But
But
so,
you
what do
are
you think about
grisly.
what's that?
Pretty grisly.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. But
Yeah.
um, uh, then there's the werewolves. Well, you mentioned one of your characters is a weird coyote.
No, no, no. That's one of the Mercy Thompson books
Oh, okay,
is a work.
okay,
I don't, sometimes if you're doing a sort of paranormal or fantasy, then you keep stretching the limits.
hmm
You've created these bad guys. Each book has a bad guy. You don't want to save the the worst or the best to last. So each book has this really bad guy, terrible bad guy. And then the next book, you have to kind of up it a little bit.
hmm
And then sometimes you have these series which are enormously successful, and I'm thrilled for people, but then you keep having to up the bad
right.
guy, you keep having to up the good guy as well, and then you end up with these incredibly complex systems. I kind of didn't want to be doing that. I wanted to keep this, I'm an environmentalist. And I wanted to keep this wild focus. I wanted to keep this focus on the land and the pack and the sacred wild. And so I didn't want to get it, like crazy magical.
Yeah, like I had mentioned before, my fantasy romance experience is very limited. But so I throughout this series, I've been kind of going to Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake
Yeah,
series, and but to your point here is that always having to up it. Um, she has all the different weird animals in there, which I thought was great. But it
right,
started off with the werewolf, the vampire, and Anita Blake, and but then each one she kind of upped the heat level.
right,
Um, and for me and a lot of our fans, from what I read too, started taking away from the initial premise of the books, which was the murder mystery, her being a necromancer, but then her also being the vampire killer,
right.
hunter, and the evil that's trying to invade the city. And so I kind of lost me a little bit towards
I,
her,
I
her
think
later
I
books.
think
But
I think this happens, and look for again, if you've got 19 books, God bless. But it is, the temptation of publishing, and I love my publisher, but the temptation I think is always to keep going with something that's been successful. And often you have a guaranteed sort of minimum number of sales, and so you keep going with that. I'm not always sure it's the greatest thing for the writer, though. It's
Right.
you sometimes you might want to go on and stretch your muscles in some other way. I mean, because I worked at Publishers Weekly, I interviewed an enormous number of writers. And one of the things that I had discovered was that if you were talking to a writer who said, and you asked, the usual question, why did you want to become a writer? And they said something like, I just didn't want to have to get dressed in the morning, or I didn't want to have to, they say something sort of like, I didn't want to do a 9 to 5 job or something else like that. Almost inevitably, that person was not going to survive as a writer. But the person who said, because I had a story that needed to be told, that person did. You tended to see that person again, and they had a career that went beyond the first one or two books. And, I didn't write my first book until I was 57. So, and people would say to me, oh, well, are you going to be a writer? And I was like, no, I don't have a story to tell. And then the stories started to come later.
That was going to be my question. Did you start writing before or after you worked at Publishers Weekly?
Well,
So but did that experience there help you in your process of writing?
it helped me in that I read an enormous amount while I was at PW. I just read, some of it you have to, if you're going to interview somebody, you have to read all of their books. Um, and some of it was just, they're there. You're a kid in the candy store. People are piling up books on the windowsill, and
Yep.
you're like, give me, give me, give me, give me. And so I read an enormous amount. I read an enormous amount, and there's nothing. I mean, I'm sure that you learn things from fine arts programs that are incredibly valuable, but as far as I can tell, nothing makes up for reading to be a writer. And I am the kind of writer that book people hate, or the kind of reader that book people hate, because I underline constantly. I make notes. I dog ear my books. There's probably somebody here who's having a heart attack as I'm saying this. Um, but I do a lot of marking up, and sometimes it's about. I found that once I've become a writer, I read differently. I read for different things. So,
Right. Yeah, my stack of local authors who keep bringing us books is getting bigger and bigger, and all the time that I don't have to read, it's hard to get into that. But so in the four books are all the same characters are in all four books, correct?
no,
Okay.
this is one of the things. It starts out with a primary couple, Silver and Tiberius. Um, and part of what the way I wanted to emphasize, there are really three types of creatures. There's humans, there are the wolves who have to change for 3 days out of the month, and then there are shifters who do not have to change. They can change, but they don't have to. And they have essentially abandoned their wild selves and become quite human. They don't really fit into the human world because they can't go to a doctor. They live too long. They're stronger and larger than most humans. But it was a way, again, they were a way of my sort of examining the difference between the wild and the tamed, or the wild and the civilized. Um, and so the first book involves the hero who is half shifter, half wolf, and a heroine who is a wolf. So that's Silver and Tie. And then each subsequent book continues their stories, but they are secondary to the main couple. So each book has a new couple.
What's the time span? Because you mentioned that the backstory, the wolves came over in in the late
1668.
1600s. Does
Yeah.
it start there, or does it start later in modern times? Well, obviously it must be modern times because they're watching movies.
Right. No, it starts in 2018. It's really sort of a year and a half. It's 1 year and a half. And uh yeah, I started in this 1668, and a couple of people have said that I should do a story based on this alpha who is a female alpha who drags her pack from the woods of Mercia to the Adirondacks. And I mean, the problem is that what I don't know about 17th century New York could fill 14 volumes. So I don't know almost anything. So I'm terrified of that idea.
So, along with the different genres, subgenres of fantasy romance, there's also, well, according to Feyerofeb's website, there's the heat levels. So, where does the heat level kind of begin in your first book, and then by your fourth book, where we're talking about having to up the ante with each book, has that increased? Has it stayed the same, or
No, it stayed the same because for me, the sex is something that happens. It's part of love, but it's also part of the narrative. Sex has a different function in each book, and I think that if you write sex as a thing that you can just drop into, willy-nilly into the story, then you're not doing it right. A really good, like uh, in the second one, the hero actually lives in New York. He is a lawyer for the pack and is losing himself. He's been off land, they call it off land, for 30 years, and he's going vaguely slightly crazy. And at first he uses sex as a weapon, and then as he gets, he falls for this woman, but he still is keeping on this shield, this camouflage of being human. And she takes his she wants to make him not be in charge. So the way she does this, she's a environmental conservation officer, is she ties him up. So that in that case, it's not the heat level, it's just a different sex for a different narrative purpose. But I always feel that the sex has to serve the characters and the narrative.
Vela Roth over here on Zoom? One of the things I love about the pack is how wolves from different cultural backgrounds have pulled together for survival. Evie is compelling as a bicultural character, blending her birth pack's traditions with the Anglo-Saxon elements of the Great North. Can you tell us more about her cultural background? What inspiration did you draw on when imagining her birth pack?
Well, Evie comes initially from Africa. They come from all different parts of the world because, in my imagining, the Great North um, is one of the few surviving packs. So Varya comes from Russia, but Evie comes initially from a decimated African pack. And I had not, I had initially, now you're going to ask me this, and now I'm trying to remember because I'd actually had a whole sort of history written for her pack. And I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but right now I'm remembering the steel coinage that was very important in my sort of creating her pack. And I'm gonna try to find the notes that I made on that for you, Velen.
So is that so? Let's talk about your writing, the actual writing of the book. So do you take notes? Are you an outliner or a pantser, or do you use a computer program like Scrivener or things like that, or just notebooks? How do you write?
Um, I had always been sort of a pantser in that I would have a beginning, I would have an end, I would have two or three of the major themes in my mind. And, you know, one of the things that amazes me about romance is I have a lot of people who can sit down and write 1,500 to 3,000 words a day. I can't do that. And at one point, I was on Twitter, which is, the source of all great wisdom. And somebody said, I was saying, look, I write slowly. And she said, do you outline? I said, no, I don't. She said, well, obviously, if you outlined, things would be much faster. And I thought, well, obviously. And so I sat down. I had seen at one point a outline. It was actually an article about outlining, and there was an outline for one of the Harry Potter books. I don't remember which. And it was so impressive. It had main characters, secondary characters, um, objects, settings, time, date, weather, everything. Just, and it was a spreadsheet. It was a work of, incredible. It was just awe-inspiring. Um, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sit down and do that. And I spent hours and hours and hours doing that. And then I got down to writing and realized that the characters didn't like what I was doing. And so the characters were developing in a certain way, and they, their emotional, I don't know, who they were was changing as I was going along. And I kept sort of trying to drag them back. I was like, I've got this beautiful outline. You are going to do what's in this outline. And in the end, that book took me way longer because I eventually had to just ditch the outline and sort of essentially start all over again. It was
So,
horrible.
so did you find yourself kind of either not liking how the characters were turning out based on
No,
the outline, or did you find yourself backing yourself into corners that just didn't fit with other portions of timeline?
no, okay, you start, it's like when you meet somebody, right? And you think they're a certain way when you first meet them. But then as you talk to them, you realize that initial impression wasn't entirely right. And the more you get to know them, the more you're thinking, no, that wasn't quite right. This is the way they are. This is a different, and then so I'm writing an outline based essentially on a first impression. And that just didn't work for me. Now, it works beautifully for a lot of people. And I think that it works especially well for people who know exactly who their character is from the get go. They've got the whole, it's based on somebody they know. It's based on, but because my characters are wolves, they're not based on anybody I know. They actually act slightly wolfy. They have different kinds of assumptions about the proper way to act. And so I don't know, it just didn't work for me.
So how long did it take you to write the first book?
First book was only 6 months, which,
Okay.
I say only, but, and the second was 6 months, and the third was a little longer, and the fourth was the outline thing, which was longer still. And then this one, because everybody's at home and I'm herding cats, is just, I don't know. I It just took a long time.
So what is on the horizon?
So this one is done. And I've got, so this book five, I'm sort of hoping I've got some writers who are interested in doing some shifter novellas. So I think I'm going to contribute one to that. I've got a book that I've been working on off and on. I started it before I did this series, and I'm going to go back to it now. It's a love affair between the angel of death and a waitress at Hooters. And it's sort of a meditation on time, but I think I'll self-publish that because it's, you know, Angel of Death and a waitress at Hooters is not really going to grab anybody.
I think it sounds kind of interesting. Have you ever thought of doing any um, side books from this series here, from some of the not the obviously not the main characters because that's what the series is about, but any side characters that are interesting that you would have when the book was done and out, that you kind of look back and say, you know what, I probably could have expanded on them a little more.
Actually, one of the best things that my editor, I had a little trouble with the third book, the main character in the third book, and I'm not even sure why. The male main character. The female main character was so strong that I think in a way she overwhelmed everything else. She overwhelmed everybody else in that book. Um, and in my heart, Varya Timur's daughter is the wolf of wolves. Um, and so I was having a little trouble with the male lead. And what my editor said was go and write something separate. Write a 15,000 word story that's essentially about his youth and childhood and growing up and everything else. And I ended up using, I don't know, maybe 2,000 words of that. And so the other 13,000 words was nothing. I didn't use it, but it was immensely helpful for setting him in my mind and giving him an ability to be without Varya's shadow over him.
Hmm.
So that was, as I said, my editor. I give her full credit for that. It was such a good idea.
What are some of the other things that you do to get yourself unstuck? If you get a stuck spot, listen to music, get up, take a run. We've had some people just jump in the shower.
Um, yeah, mostly I one of the things that I tend to do is read. I find that when I'm reading, um, I'll come across something, and again, like I said, I'm a different reader as a writer than I was when I was just reading. And I'll come across something and I'll think, yeah, that's the way to introduce this new concept. It's often a weird thing. It's often like a transition or something else. Or one of the things that I just find all sorts of things from reading.
Have you been? Were you ever in a moment where you were writing and then you were going back, rereading it to kind of edit it and say, you know what, that sounds too much like this person or this book or.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I honestly don't think so. I I have utterly and absolutely unashamedly plagiarized anything that has to do with driving. And my books have very little to do with driving. But if there's any scene where somebody is looking over their shoulder to look in a rear view mirror, or doing looking in the back seat or looking in a rear view mirror, or holding their hands on a wheel, that has come from somebody else because I do not drive. And I mean, it's like 3 words, but I that I don't think I don't think anybody would recognize their 3 words.
Mhm.
But if they do, I'm really sorry.
So you say you have an editor. Do you have an agent?
Yes, I do. I have a wonderful agent.
How did you go about doing that? Getting an agent?
I actually found my agent. My agent was a mom at my older son's high school. And I met her there and we were talking and she said, I sent on a manuscript and she liked it, which was a kind of amazing thing. It was the last wolf that I sent on to her and she took it and she's been wonderful.
Now that's the third. Is that the
No,
first
that's
book?
the first one.
That's the
That's the
first one.
first one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you try to submit it to anybody else? Because you said you were might self-publish the next one, but these ones here were published under,
Uh,
and I was going to write
Source
it down, but
Book,
I can't.
Source
Okay.
Books Casablanca. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you try to submit to other people first and then finally give her the manuscript, or
No,
how
no,
did the
no, no.
whole thing go?
The way it works, I mean, it's always a bit of, I think for a lot of people, it's a bit of a mystery. And I'm always, my incredibly small expertise, I'm happy to share with anybody. Uh, but I think, I sent it to her, and then she was my beta reader. She is my beta reader. And so she's the only other person who reads the books before they get sent on to the editor. And she'll make some suggestions, and I'll take those suggestions and, rework, and then I send it on to the editor. So she is fantastic that way. She earns her pennies.
Now, do you use an independent editor, or do you use one
No, no, no.
provided by your
It's
publisher?
it's the publisher. Yeah, absolutely.
How much involved are you with the entire thing, with the editing, with the book covers are beautiful.
I know they
Absolutely.
did a fabulous job of, okay. So here's when I first saw them, here's something that you probably don't see, but anybody who does have a chance to look at them, see, there's this place right here, which I didn't notice until the second day I'd been looking at this. It's like my first book. You keep looking at it over and over, and it's Tiberius's arms are sort of hugging the land. There's a little bit of the wild land at the bottom, right here. You can see a little lake, and his hands are there, sort of holding them, cradling them, the land.
Hmm.
And it was just such a perfect, almost imperceptible detail, but it just showed to me such incredible care for the meaning of the books. I mean, I was just blown away.
The first thing that struck me when we got the box in that contained your books were the eyes on all the books, the eyes. And so then it took me a while. I was actually putting them out on the shelves, or when I was putting the information into the computer, our point of sale system. That I'm like, wait a minute, that's a person. I didn't notice the arms. I will look for
Right,
that tomorrow though.
right, right.
Um,
And
but yeah, they were just the eyes and just the shape of the face. Just of course they all say
right,
wolf, but then
right,
there's those details in
right.
there that come
No, I think
afterwards.
they did an amazing job. They did an amazing job. I couldn't have been more pleased.
So was it a lot of back and forth, or just a little bit of back and forth? Did you give them ideas of what you would like, or did they base it
I,
on the story?
I gave them ideas of what I would like, and the God's honest truth is I can't buy a throw pillow with any great surety. I mean, I have no design sense whatsoever. So I gave them some ideas, and I realized as I was giving them these ideas that they were incredibly messy. They would have been a disaster on a bookshelf. So, so no, they talked me down from that ledge, and then they showed it to me, and I was, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't like it. I just have no idea because I like them so much.
So who came up with the title? Did you come up with the titles, or did your
No,
publishers? Or
they did. They did. And my initial title for the first one was called Silver, which was because I thought of it as a standalone. It was, I didn't realize at that point that that there really aren't standalones in genre publishing. Uh, Not really, not a lot. At least not in any of the genres I know. They come in trilogies, or they come in series, or something like that. And so then I was asked to come up with a trilogy. And so I came up with a trilogy. The Last Wolf is great because the heroine Silver is the runt of the pack. So she is the last wolf. She's the least wolf. Um, and so I loved the title.
um, what are some of the most? I mean, obviously, a good story is very important to have be successful with your book. What do you think is the most important thing? The title, the cover, the
I mean, I do think the cover is inordinately important. Even, it used to be that was the thing. It used to be that you would just see this, unless you were incredibly lucky. Most writers, the spine was the only thing anybody would see at a bookstore. Um, but now people do see covers more frequently. And I think that it has a huge impact on their buying decision. And then after that, the cover copy.
Mhm.
And, the first, what, 30 pages, whatever it is that you're going to look through. Unfortunately, some people have taken that so much to heart. I've read a few books where the first three chapters are absolute gold, and then it's like they just gave up on the last 30, and you're sort of trying to get that feeling back.
Mhm. Do you do a lot of your own marketing, or does your publisher?
My publisher does a lot of marketing. I try to do marketing. Am I any good at it? No, no. I mean, I like talking to readers. So that's fun. But in terms of like getting onto social media and figuring out how that works, really devoting myself to that, I just no.
Oh, I know you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, or on Instagram. You made the choice to get off of Facebook.
Right.
Um, has that affected
I have no
you?
idea. I mean, the I just felt that Facebook was such a pernicious influence. Um, and I felt unable to control it. You know, I I'm I'm too old. I think Facebook is hits a certain age group. People who were sort of college kids or a little after when it was first being developed, for them it hits a sweet spot. I was a full-blown grown up, by the time Facebook came around, and so I never learned how to use it. And by the time I learned how to use it, it was incredibly complicated, and it was monetized. It was so heavily monetized. Essentially, if you did not pay, you were not going to get the kind of I don't know, you weren't going to get the kind of play that you
Mhm.
needed. And I don't know, the whole thing felt bad to me. So I just
Oh, I, I'm right there with you. It came around. I wanted nothing to do with it. I got into my ancestry thing, and so I was trying to find, I got on just for cousins to try to find, relatives and stuff, and that was it. I never posted anything. I
Right,
did one group so that relatives could see what I was researching.
right,
But then we opened the store, and it's almost an evil necessity, really, to
right,
get
exactly,
our
exactly.
message out. So, do you belong to
Like
any
this,
writing?
right.
What was that?
For things like this, it's
Yeah,
fantastic. But
yeah. Do you belong to any writing groups? Have you ever started writing groups or book clubs or
um,
retreats?
I have sort of, given that I don't do Facebook, I do have a messenger. Um, I have a messenger group of writers, and great group of women, and we talk mostly about things that are constant questions. What do you do about lapsed rights, or what do you do about marketing a sale, or what do you do about your biggest resource as a writer, the things that I had not realized early enough was your biggest resource as a writer is other writers. Um, just it's a wonderful group. I have to say all the romance writers I've ever met have been fantastic. I think most people feel like, the rising tide lifts all boats. So there isn't that. I have not found the competitiveness that people might be, afraid of.
Mhm.
So
Have you ever done any um, retreats prior to COVID, or have you been to any conventions prior to
I've been to
COVID?
conferences. I'm a sort of I'm a what I can call a high functioning introvert. So I'm about good for about 2 hours. And after 2 hours, I am in a bathroom stall and I'm not talking to anybody. Um, but so I always went to conferences with a little trepidation because it requires being on a lot.
Mhm.
Um, but I really liked them, partly because I was meeting a few readers when you're first starting out. It's a very few readers. And then you're meeting other people. And, the truth is, we were all talking about books. So I remember going to Book Lovers Convention in New Orleans and just talking to people about other people's books, about all the things that, I read and I loved, and I took down all sorts of recommendations. I miss that. I miss
Mhm.
being with a bunch of bookish people talking about bookish things. And in a way that I never thought I would really miss it, but I do.
Is that something you realize with the pandemic and everything, how much you miss being around those conventions
Yeah.
and talking to people? So is that what are you looking forward to when this is finally over in the fall, next spring, hopefully not too much longer?
Yeah. I actually am I'm looking forward to going to a convention. I'm looking forward to meeting with writers in New York again, and getting together with friends I have here. And, I'm looking forward to traveling again. One of the things that I did as part of the research for this was to go up to the Wolf Conservation Center in Salem, New York. And they have an overnight. You can go there, and I took my youngest son. We went there and spent the night. You sleep in a tent, and a couple of times during the night, the wolves will start to howl.
Mm.
And, no idea why. But it was just such a wondrous thing, and I would love to do that again.
One of our neighbors, I guess not owns, but sponsors
Hmm.
a wolf, and then maybe that conservation thing. So I was wondering, is that something that you do, or
I give money to I usually, I think when you sort of, like, you can adopt a wolf through the Wolf Conservation Center,
that's yeah, adopt a wolf, yeah,
but I don't adopt a wolf. I just give them
right.
money, which I think ends up being the same thing. So, and no, I think they do great work. I have them in my fifth volume, because one of the things that wolves will do that very few other animals will is they will cross foster. So that means that if you introduce a baby wolf to a denning mother, they not necessarily will, but may well take that orphaned wolf in. And so I have that as an aspect of what happens in the fifth volume.
Hmm.
I have the Wolf Conservation Center come up there with an orphan wolf and introduce it to a denning wolf on their land. So
When you're writing that, did you talk to anybody there about it? Let them know that they're
I
going to
don't
be
I don't
part of your
I don't
book,
say
or
the Wolf Conservation
oh,
Center.
okay, okay, just kind of
No,
allude to it.
yeah, I just sort of allude to, yeah, no, 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 I don't want to get into, I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't be taking their name in vain, but
Well, that's what I was wondering because some people use music lyrics, some people use actual places in their books. So I would assume you need to get permission for that. So is that something that you would think of in future books, going out and getting something like that? The See,
um,
I don't know how that works because we had I kind of do, but we had a book come in and somebody used the lyrics for like a Britney Spears song or something like that in her thing, and there were no credits for it, and it's a local author, and I'm like, okay, not quite
right.
sure what the copyright rules are about having this, so I declined the book, but
Honestly, it hasn't come up. Um, I used some dialogue from Underworld in the fourth book. A few lines, but I don't know. I think that if you're using like 3 or 4 lines, it's not as big a deal, and it's definitely referenced as that.
right.
So. I mean, I don't think you need to get permission if it's referenced as that for a few lines.
Well, I did mention to Harriet Moore way back when I was talking to her that it seems like the Pharaoh Fed thing has really taken off. It's doing really well, and that if she ever decides to turn it into a convention, we have a space right now, and we'd love to have it as the first convention. And you're more than welcome
Well, thank you. That would
come
be
and join us.
wonderful. I would love
Uh,
to. My brother lives in Vermont, so you know, a little ways away, but not so far.
no, not so far. Um, so uh, I also noticed that your not only are the books in print, but the first two books, anyways, are in audiobook format.
Yes, and the third book, unfortunately, my publisher was moving from one audiobook publisher to another. So they had been at Tantor, and then they went through like a few months during which they sort of were betwixt and between audiobook publishers, I think they're called, or producers. Um, and so books that were sort of published in that interim space didn't get audiobook. So, which was slightly annoying, but I am going to go ahead and I have gotten myself a narrator who's quite wonderful. And so I'm going to have her do that and try to release that sometime in the spring or summer.
Well, I'm happy to announce that those two books are available through Libro.fm,
Yeah,
which is a wonderful sponsor, not sponsor, but partner with our store. We do
right.
get a portion of the sales for anybody who does download The Last Wolf and uh,
And A
sorry,
Wolf
the second one,
Apart.
The Wolf
And
Apart.
I will tell you with The Last Wolf, the narrator was wonderful and asked me for audio files on all of the Old English in there.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was very careful. I did all the Old English for her, and so sent all that off as audio files.
So you're the first you in all the series that all the talks that we've done with authors since July. You are the first one who's had audiobooks on Libro for me to be able to ask, what is the process like? Do you get to choose the narrators? Do you have a say in the production? Are you there while they're producing it?
No, no to the last. The first part, what they usually do is they give you a few possible narrators, and you just sort of and they tell you what they have links, they have some samples. You listen to them and try to decide which one best approximates your books, and but you can't ever really be sure. But you don't want somebody like I would not want somebody with a British accent to do these books. Um, so yeah, I'm not having somebody with a Russian accent do the third book either, even though Varya is Russian. But that's okay.
So so how do you get your books onto Libro? For those who are thinking of doing audiobooks or do have them in another platform who would like to get them onto Libro?
I am
Or is that something
still
that your
looking.
publisher did?
That is something that the publisher did. I
Okay.
am going to look into how that is done, because there are a few audio publishing platforms, and I'm going to try to figure out how that works. And because getting them onto Libro is crucial to me. There are a couple of things that I think are really important, and as writers, we need to be proactive, making sure that Libro is part of our publishing strategy is one of them. I'm personally very grateful to Sourcebooks, which has a fairly generous library pricing strategy. I know nobody else is interested in library pricing, but I'm interested in library pricing. But I'm just saying that, there are all these things that writers, I think, need to be aware of so that we can support libraries and and indie bookstores as much as we can.
Well, I noticed also on your webpage, which is your website, which is www.mariavale.com, that where you have uh, the page on your website about the books. You got the first three on there, but they all have links um, to purchase them. Obviously, you can purchase them through them. I'm trying to pull this up on my other computer here. But IndieBound is a great source for searching for indie bookstores, and a lot use them as their e-commerce platform. Um, Ripped Bodice, I've just been hearing about them. Um, uh, Universal Link, Last Wolf. What is that?
A universal link is simply the ebook link. So you
Okay.
can, so for anybody out there who's writing, it's always worthwhile if a lot of people buy ebooks. That's just the universal link, and that will take you to any of the, main ebook
Okay.
platforms.
For us, it's my must reads or
Right?
Hummingbird Digital Media. You can get to the link through our website, and I'm sure you can do a search,
Yeah,
and you most likely, I would assume, find your
they are
ebooks
there.
on that platform. And again, they remit some of the sales to us. But what I like especially, you have IndieBound first, but you also have bookshop.org as number two as the link
Right.
to get your books, which again, a wonderful company that helps support local bookstores.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say thank you for that and really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Nothing works without independent bookstores. It's the lifeblood of being a writer, and not being able to get the books out to readers is pointless. And as we were talking beforehand, you know, you are not an algorithm. You can actually say, what books do you like? What movies do you like? What TV shows do you like? Tell me those things, and I will suggest some books for you.
Yep.
And so that is enormously helpful.
So kind of going back to the marketing thing, how important is it to have a website as far as being able to market?
Crucial. 100% crucial. I mean, I think you can do without Twitter. I think you can do without Instagram or Facebook. The social media aspect of it is a bit of a chore. Um, it is helpful to just, blast out sales or anything. But I think to have a website where you can have your events listed, I think you're listed up on
Hmm.
events, and then you can have links to it. And then to have a newsletter sign up. So I just do a newsletter once a month. Um, and in it, I try to put some little thing um, about some news or some information. Sometimes it's about mythology, sometimes it's whatever it is, some little thing, and then information about events or sales, and Bob's your uncle.
Now, do you do like a blog or because I
I
didn't
do.
see that on your website, but did you do something different like that, or is
No, I don't do a blog. I don't, some people do. But in a way, the newsletter is a very truncated blog. I try to write something for it every month. But as I said, I am a slow writer, so to try to, you know, to try to write a blog, a newsletter, books, Instagram, and
Mhm.
Twitter is sort of more than I have in me.
So I was also one more thing about the website here. I was looking at the gallery, which I hadn't looked at yet, but there's some beautiful artwork on here. Are these the characters
Right.
from
Yeah. Some
your
people have
stories?
done, people have done some nice things, and I've asked their permission, obviously, before putting them
Mhm.
up there. But it's lovely. It's so wonderful. I'm so flattered to see people taking the books and making them, giving them a different kind of life.
Do you have a big fan base that does that?
I have a big fan base. I have a dedicated fan base. I have
Is That's the word, dedicated fan base that do these drawings and stuff to,
Yeah, I have, they're wonderful. what can I say? They're just really wonderful. And I email with some people, and I really appreciate people. There's so much out there,
Mhm.
and for a reader to take the time on someone who's relatively unknown, and to actually read all of these books is, to me, I'm just unbelievably grateful.
So back to the audiobook. If you had, um, so you get to pick the voice actor or actress to read, but if you could have any famous person,
Read.
anyone,
Oh my gosh.
read and narrate your next audiobook, who would it be?
Oh, you're asking a question about, because usually the question, I'd never thought about this, because usually the question is, what actor do you imagine in these roles?
Well, that was going to be the next
Like
question, but
and now I'm just trying to think about whose voice do I love, and could I imagine in these roles? And I can't tell you. I honestly can't tell you. I can't bring up a voice that I love so much.
there's one that was one of the first audiobooks I ever listened to when we opened the store and joined with Libra was T.S. Eliot's poems and works, and it was read by Jeremy Irons,
Oh,
and I just went, yeah, ah.
I know.
You know, his voice was perfect. James Earl Jones is another
Oh
great
yeah, yeah.
great voice. So
And actually, there was I, Tom Hiddleston did a bunch of poems. Um, I don't know, I can't remember. He did some, I think, some T.S. Eliot, and he was actually wonderful doing them. I would not have expected it, but he was wonderful doing them.
if a director or a producer for Netflix, HBO, or just cable TV came to you and said, "We'd like to take at least your first book, if not your whole series, and make them into on the either big screen or small screen," what would you say? Sure.
Um, I think everybody loves that idea. You know, mm,
What would you rather have? Would you rather have just like your each individual book as like a big screen series like Star Wars or Harry Potter, or would you rather see them all sort of run together like a big Netflix or Hulu thing, like a Handmaid's
if I
Tale
had
type
my
series?
druthers, it would be TV, I think, because actually the best thing that I have watched in the past year and a half was Watchmen. I don't know if you saw that, but it
I
was
haven't, but
with Regina King. It was so, so good. And the I never watched Lost, but my son says it's a fantastic series. But I guess the director's name is Lindorf, something like that.
I don't know.
And he was the director for Watchmen. And he did such an amazing job with that. And Regina King did such an amazing job. Um, so I've just been so impressed by what I see on TV that, in a way, I'd rather do that. It's you have an intimacy. Now apparently, though, on TV, the streaming services says there's no way of judging how many people are watching, which seems kind of odd to me.
Mhm.
So apparently royalties don't you don't get royalties that way, but which is odd.
Yeah, that is weird. So now the question is, who would play your characters?
Okay. I had okay, and now I've forgotten this woman's name who would play Silver. But for anybody who knows the Harry Potter movies, the woman who plays Fleur in the Harry Potter movies, there is one picture of her where she's not sort of, it's very hard to find an image of a woman who's not sort of smiling and trying to look pleasing. So there's one image of her that I find wild enough to be Silver. And then Mike Coulter would be Tiberius.
Who's that?
He played Lucas Cage. I don't know if you know. That's like a superhero TV series.
No.
But I like,
Okay.
I have two teenage boys. I watch this superhero stuff.
So I guess floor is Clemens Posey.
Yes, Clemens Posey.
Poesy is that? Is it,
Poesie, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's little
Yeah.
accent marks on the name there, but
Yeah.
it's French. Um, what are your some of your favorite shows? What are some of your favorite movies?
Uh, Favorite movies. Okay, so I really liked Watchmen. I also liked, we've been binge watching a lot of things. So Spiral, which is a French sort of police drama. Um, we've watched, uh, oh gosh, Killing Eve, which I don't know if you know that, but that was also a sort of, it was about a sociopath assassin. Um, and the woman in MI6, I think, who is trying to capture her and become sort of obsessed with her. Um, and oh wait, oh, Kim's Convenience, which is a completely different thing. It's very funny. It's a comedy set in Toronto. Um, yeah, those are a bunch of things. I'm just trying to think of what I've watched sort of
Yeah,
recently that's really stuck with me.
yeah,
We've all been doing so much, um, I just, staring at the screen or binge watching, um, since we can't do anything else.
right. Do you find you're doing more of that than reading, and kind of all of a sudden realize like, no, you know what? I need to go read a book and get away from the TV and the social media and the computer.
Well, we're at home. My husband also writes, so we're working and writing a lot. So we're in front of the screens a lot, and sometimes just to, veg out at night, we do that. But then we go and read. So
What does your husband write? Does he write novels or does he write for?
he writes nonfiction.
Oh, you're welcome to give him a plug if you like.
All right, that's all right. Oh.
What are you reading right now? And then what is your all time favorite book ever? Like mine is Les Miserables. I can't say much more with that. That's just has everything that I like in a book, minus all the French
Right,
cities and streets and stuff.
right,
But
right.
but just the story itself, I can't get enough of that story.
My uncle's name was Valjean. I always thought it was an odd name. We called him Valjean, but his
Mm,
name was Valjean. Um, my favorite all-time book is Grendel by John Gardner. And that is actually, I don't know if you know it, it's a very slim little book that I think came out in the 60s or
mm-hmm.
70s. And it is really a book about what it is to be a monster. And in a way, I've always loved books from the monster's perspective. So I liked things like The Last Werewolf, um, by Glenn Duncan, I think is his name. I think that's his name. Um, uh, the Minotaur Takes a Cigarette Break. All of these books that are about monsters because it's about being on the outside looking in. When I was little, I my mom was an academic, a divorced woman and academic, and we moved around constantly. So I was rarely became a part of any community, and I was sort of always the outsider. And I think as a result, I have a great sympathy for monsters. for the outsiders.
Mhm.
Another one that I love is The White Sargasso Sea by Jean Reese, which is about in Jane Eyre, the wife in the attic
Mhm.
is Bert, and the Wide Sargasso Sea tells the story from her perspective, and it's just wonderful. It could not be. It's again very slim, very perfect.
I think we had a copy of Grendel in the book. I know we had Beowulf, a couple versions of that, but I'm pretty sure we still have Grendel in the thing. And the movie I referenced earlier, it is Beowulf and Grendel. It was 2005, and it's Gerard Butler is
Uh-huh.
plays Beowulf. Fantastic movie.
Okay, well,
Um,
I'll definitely check that out.
what's a book that you read that you never thought you would like, but just absolutely love? Something out of the ordinary that you typically don't read, or do you just kind of read across all genres?
Wow. I feel like there is something I read pretty broadly. Um, I came across a book, it was at a used bookstore, and it was called Words for My Deaf Daughter or something like that. It was ancient. I'm sure it's not in print anymore, but it was actually quite beautiful. It was a sort of long stream of consciousness about trying to explain sound and voice and communication to uh, by this man to his deaf daughter. And I had just come, as I said, I had gone to a used bookstore. It was actually, I think, on the freebie shelf because it was sort of ripped up. And I love the smell sometimes, some of the used books. So I think that's why I picked it up, but then I really liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I love going to older bookstores. Ours is mixed new and used, but more the newer not so old books, but
Right,
walking into a really old bookstore and just sort of have that leather smell from some of the leather
right,
bound books, the
right,
little musty odor there.
right.
We have a
Well, it's
great.
the serendipity of it too. It's like one thing to go to a bookstore and know what you're looking for. I'm looking for this type of thing.
Mhm.
But when you're in, especially like you're in the freebie shelf, you've got everything jammed together. You've got flowers of the Arctic next to this book, next to something else.
Right.
And I think serendipity is one of those, especially as we all become more focused and, sort of in a hallway where all of our interests are, we're living in a bubble. I think whenever you can have an opportunity for serendipity, that's huge,
Yep. Yep.
huge.
I have to say my bubble it was burst by finding out about this and the Pharaoh Feb thing, because it has opened my eyes to a different genre, which I'm enjoying, and actually realizing that I hadn't already enjoyed by some of the books that
Right.
I have read that I'm finding out that are kind of in that. What's the oldest book you have on your shelf at home?
I think the oldest book, I mean, that is not like a family book, not like a
Right.
family hymnal or something. Um, one of the oldest book I have is Farley Mowat's book about wolves. So um, it's been there forever. And I think it's like was published, I think it's a 1967 book or something like that.
Is that one of your like prized possession books, or do you have
Yeah,
another one that's sort of a prized possessions?
yeah,
We have uh, well, I mean, it's a family heirloom, but it's a 150-year-old plus uh, family Bible, big, huge thing with the big
right,
metal clasps and everything. So that's one of our prized, especially my wife's. It's on her side of the family, but it's the oldest book we have. It's just
right.
beautifully done book, and So
Yeah.
this book here for you is your.
Well, I mean, it's not, I do have like family hymnals and there's some family photograph albums and things like that. But I'm trying to think, outside of that,
Yeah.
probably this.
Yeah. Well,
So,
great.
anyway.
Um, anything else you want to
No,
plug?
I just
What's
wanted to say thank you so much for doing this. I love the bookstores. Now there is, I am given, there's a gift certificate to free thinkers for somebody. If you want to, can you do the choosing, Chris?
me?
Yeah, you. But or if you want to just DM me, I can then put everybody's names into a hat,
Okay.
and uh, uh, I'm easy to find, or you can email me. I'm not giving out any big secrets because everybody's got my email. It's mariaksvale@gmail. I'll
All
actually,
right. Well, if everybody who's
sorry. That was an old message. Okay. Oh, except that's .com, not .com.
is it Marie? It's Maria
Maria
KS.
KS Vale.
Okay. Okay. Yep. And then her, of course, her website is mariavale.com. But email her and I'll let you choose because we do have some Facebook watchers as well. So everybody on Facebook as well. Yep. Me.
Okay.
Yeah, come
If you
on.
can, if you can just make sure that they have access to my email, that would be great. Because
Yep.
yeah,
So it's mariaksvale@gmail.com.
exactly.
So why don't I can even just throw that up here real quick. Maria KS Vale at gmail.com. There we go. That's on there too, so everybody can see that. And yeah, I'll
Okay.
let you do
Thank you so much, Chris.
you.
This has been wonderful. And hopefully we'll have a chance to speak again, and maybe we'll do a Pharaoh Feb
Yep,
event with you guys
absolutely.
in the fall.
Yeah.
Spring.
So again, the books are available in the store, available through her, available bookshop.org, libro.fm, Hummingbird Digital Media. You can get to our link for that through our website. And thank you again, everybody who had questions or participated and watched. And Maria, thank you. And I look forward to someday having you in the store in person.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay, take care. Bye.